Hi, I'm Oliver Stone, and this summer I invite you to witness my latest creation.
It's Oliver Stone Land!
Welcome to the future site of Oliver Stone Land, my own amusement park. Let me be your host as I usher you through reality, my reality. A magical place where the objective is not to escape, but to confront.
Oliver Stone is a remarkable figure in movie-making history, tackling large subjects that have deeply affected him. Growing up during the time of nuclear war, fighting in Vietnam, choosing to study film, then finished his degree at Yale. Stone covers American politics in his films, but doesn't claim to be a political filmmaker. He calls himself a dramatist, saying his films are, first and foremost, dramas about individuals and personal struggles. Oliver Stone uses film to not only help him, but to help audiences to self-reflect on their lives and their roles in society.
I've always been sheltered and special. I just want to be anonymous, like everybody else. Do my share for my country. Live up to what Grandpa did in the first war, and Dad did in the second. Well, here I am, anonymous all right.
To essentially have empathy for other people. He has made many films that range from war, American presidents, music, and killers. In this video, I want to talk about Oliver Stone's life and how he became a household name, and his eventual fall where he drops Hollywood. Oliver Stone was born in New York City in 1946 and grew up in Manhattan and Stamford, Connecticut. His father was a stockbroker and his mother was French. They met during World War II when Stone's father was part of the Allied forces in France. Stone lived a privileged life in Manhattan and attended Trinity School in New York City. Eventually, his parents shipped him off to college prep school in Pennsylvania. During that time, Stone's parents got divorced as soon as Stone left for Pennsylvania.
But that evening, I spoke to my father on the phone. It was a conversation, as I suspected, that would change my life. Oliver, your mother and I are getting a divorce. She's in love with another man. I can't stand it any longer. Who is this man? I demanded. A hairdresser she knows, Miles Gable. He'd explain everything in detail soon, he said. He'd arrange a trip for the two of us to Florida, where we'd play tennis, be bachelors together. We'd talk and we'd bond, and my mother would quietly recede into the edges of my life. But where was my mother? She hadn't even called. She'd tell me later she was in shock. Everything in her world had crumbled so suddenly. She was embarrassed, quote unquote. Over time, she described the lengths to which my father had gone to obtain the divorce, including hiring a private investigator to track her movements. Most of my parents' respectable New York business community friends dropped her. Mom was now a woman living in shame. It all really was a lie. Dad had told me only half the story. He, I'd find out, had been having affairs since the marriage began, with models, the wives of their friends, hookers, even our Swiss nanny. In the big picture, which no one really thinks about in the middle of the storm, it was the end of the family. I had no brother or sister to share the blow with.
Eventually, Stone went to Yale University, apparently in the same class as George W. Bush, but he left for Vietnam in April 1967. Oliver didn't want to be a filmmaker, but instead a novelist.
That's something you'd always wanted to be, or was that the natural mode of expression for you?
No. I was a writer before Vietnam. Wrote a book, which came out a few years ago, it's Child's Night Dream. And after the war, I vowed never to write a book again because I didn't believe in the future of the novel. I started to think, because in the late 60s, film schools were becoming popular. The Fellini, Antonioni, the French New Wave, all these were coming into vogue in New York where I was living. So a couple of friends of mine who I'd known prior had gone to film schools. I couldn't believe they were given diplomas for going to see films all day. That was kind of fun.
In Vietnam, Stone enlisted in the Army. From September 16, 1967 to April 1968, he served in Vietnam with the 2nd Platoon, B Company, 3rd Battalion, 22nd Infantry Regiment, and 25th Infantry Division, and was twice wounded in action. He won many awards after battle, including a Bronze Star with a V device for valor and a Purple Heart. Afterwards, Stone went back to school in New York to study film at NYU, and received his BFA in 1971. Here, his professors included director and fellow NYU alumnus Martin Scorsese. His short film that did well with his class was a 12-minute short called Last Year in Vietnam. During this time, Stone worked various jobs, ranging from taxi jobs and assistant jobs in New York City.
It was going on that year since I'd come back from Vietnam, and I was lost in a spiral of feelings, writing half-baked scripts, taking LSD and grass, and engaging in sex, a lot of lust. New York parties, random girls, young and old. I was drifting. To my dad, I was the idiot son who'd never amount to much. By comparison, his brother's oldest son, my cousin Jimmy, would be teaching economics at Harvard at 25 before going on to found a private insurance company in Massachusetts and becoming a multi-millionaire. Next to him, I seemed pointless. I was on the road to becoming what my dad had always feared, a bum. When I'd finished film school, there hadn't been much to celebrate. There were no jobs waiting. Several of us went into cab driving, working from 6 p.m. till 2 or 3 a.m., which allowed me to keep writing screenplays in the daytime. I'd expected it to be the same as Hollywood, but Los Angeles was shockingly generous to me. Beginner luck in a casino.
But eventually established himself as a screenwriter in Midnight Express in 1978, Seizure in 1974, and then The Hand in 1981. Stone won his first Oscar in 1979 for Midnight Express. After success for Midnight Express, Stone found work as a screenwriter and wrote Conan the Barbarian in 1982, Scarface in 1983, and then The Year of the Dragon in 1985. Stone next film as a director, releasing the same year, is Salvador and Platoon in 1986. He worked on both films simultaneously, going to Mexico for Salvador to shoot, and then the Philippines for Platoon. When Stone decided to do Scarface, he didn't have interest in doing the gangster, since it's a formulaic genre that he felt he didn't have anything new to bring to the table. That is until a popular producer, Martin Bergman, got the idea to take the classic 1930s Scarface and develop it to fit what was happening in America with immigration and drugs. Cindy Lumet was the first choice to direct the film, and came up with the idea to have the characters be Cuban and include the 1980 Mariel Harbor boat life story. Stone loved the idea to take the 1930s prohibition gangster film and make it into a modern immigrant gangster movie, instead dealing with drugs instead of alcohol. The prohibition against drugs created the same criminal class that prohibited alcohol gangsters, fueled Stone's inspiration. However, Cindy Lumet hated Stone's script, but Bergman wanted to continue, and therefore Scarface was in production. During the writing process for Scarface, Stone spent time in Florida and the Caribbean, interviewing many. He was also dealing with a personal drug problem with cocaine use, but it helped him flesh out what drugs can do to its users. He decided that he needed to stop and moved out of the country to Paris. He quotes that he wrote the script totally fucking sober. Brian De Palma loved the script and decided to drop Flashdance in 1983 to direct Scarface. However, most of the film was shot in LA, few reasons being that the Miami Tourist Board decided not to allow filming, afraid it would discourage tourists from visiting due to the subject matter of the film. The response to the film was mixed, mostly negative due to the violence and subject matter of the film. Famous writers like Kurt Vonnegut and John Irving walked out. Scorsese turned to Steve Bauer and told him, "You guys are great, but be prepared, because they're going to hate it, Hollywood, because it's about them." On March 6, 1986, starring James Woods. Stone originally wanted Marlon Brando in the film, but during this period, Brando was a recluse. Stone had a difficult time getting funding for this film and ended up putting up a second mortgage on his home to get finance. However, a producer picked up the film and made it under $5 million. The film was based on a real journalist and friend of Stone's, Richard Boyle, who co-wrote the movie. It takes place in Mexico. It's about a photojournalist covering the Salvadorian Civil War who becomes entangled with both the FMLN and the right-wing military, while trying to rescue his girlfriend and her children. The film did poorly in the box office, but was nominated at the Oscars alongside Platoon that came out the same year. In 1986, Platoon came out. A story of a young soldier played by Charlie Sheen facing a moral crisis when he's confronted with the horrors of war and duality of man. Stone would be the first Vietnam veteran to direct a major motion picture about Vietnam, and previously already was the first Vietnam veteran to win the Oscar for Midnight Express. He had written the script in the late 60s based on his experiences in Vietnam. Originally it was called Break. In 1971, when Stone wrote the first draft of the film, he sent it to Jim Morrison, of all people, to play the young soldier. When Morrison was found dead in Paris, he had the script on him, so they eventually got Charlie Sheen to play the role, mirroring his father, Martin Sheen, in Apocalypse Now. Even Val Kilmer auditioned for the role for Sergeant Ilyas. who Stone originally wanted the character to be Native American. Kilmer gave a strange audition where he portrayed the character as an Indian shaman. The role was eventually given to William Dafoe. When the cast and crew arrived in the Philippines in 1986, it was right before the EDSA Revolution of 1986. Everyone believed that the film was most likely going to be cancelled, and that no one was going to leave the country until Stone had to go to the new government and convince them to start shooting the film. They got permission to use the military's equipment and employed many of the Vietnamese refugees living in the Philippines to act as different roles as Vietnamese in the film. While shooting, actors hated Oliver Stone on set, saying he was rough and abusive. Some say bordered in psychotic behavior due to Stone's sleep deprivation and PTSD. Stone wanted to capture the accuracy of the war by having the actors undergo intense training in the Philippines and deprive them of sleep and burn them out. The film would go on to win many Oscars, including Best Editing, Sound, Director, and Picture in the 1987 Academy Awards.
The winner is Oliver Stone for Platoon!
The film was a great success in the box office and critics, but had controversy with racial depiction. Wallace Terry, a black journalist who served 2 tours of Vietnam, called Platoon a slap in the face, and there were no black soldiers depicted as officers. And the 3 notable black soldiers in the film were all portrayed as cowards. Terry also says the film perpetuates black stereotypes. Platoon helped launch Stone's career, where he was able to do Wall Street in 1987. Stone's main inspiration came from his father being a stockbroker in Wall Street during the Great Depression. Originally called Greed, Stone wrote the character to be Jewish, but changed it to avoid the stereotype that Jewish people control Wall Street. Stone and his co-writer Stanley Wisner did research and interviews with Wall Street stockbrokers and investors, and even based characters on real-life people and scandals. The film stars Charlie Sheen again, who plays a young stockbroker who is willing to do what it takes to get to the top. The film also stars Michael Douglas.
That greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
The film was notorious for Daryl Hannah's performance that actually earned her a Razzie Award. When Hannah accepted the part as the main character's materialistic girlfriend, she regretted it and was never happy with the role. Stone admits that Hannah was miscasted, but claimed to be too proud to replace her, which caused tension on set since Sean Young wanted to replace her the entire time. However, Young always showed up late to set and unprepared. Her and Charlie Sheen didn't get along, even went out of his way to write on a piece of paper, "I am a and stick it on her back." Her role was supposed to be much larger, but eventually was reduced due to the issues. Daryl Hannah eventually came out and called Oliver Stone a misogynist and admits to never watching the film. When the film was released, it earned $4 million on its opening weekend, and the film got 1 Oscar for Best Actor, Michael Douglas. In 2010, Stone made a sequel to Wall Street called Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, starring Michael Douglas and Shia LaBeouf. The film got positive reception at the 2010 Cannes Film Festival, but had mixed reviews with critics. However, the film did well in the box office, topping opening weekend in the US. Stone's next film is Talk Radio 1988. Talk Radio is based on Eric Bogosian's Pulitzer Prize play in the life of Alan Berg, who was assassinated by a white nationalist group in 1984. Shot in Dallas, the film explores a complex relationship between radio host and his audience, where Eric Bogosian plays a character, Barry Chaplin, who criticizes his callers with long rants, hatred, and sarcasm, and eventually this takes a toll on Barry as the night progresses.
I denounce the system as I embrace it. I want money and power and prestige. I want ratings and success. I don't give a damn about you or the world. That's the truth. For this, I could say I'm sorry, but I won't. Why should I? I mean, who the hell are you anyways, you audience? You're on me every night like a pack of wolves because you can't stand facing what you are and what you've made. Yes, the world is a terrible place. Yes, cancer and garbage disposals will get you. Yes, a war is coming. Yes, the world is shut to hell and you're all goners. Everything's screwed up and you like it that way, don't you?
Bogosian also refers to Tom Lenka's talk show and took many speech patterns and mannerisms of real-life talker.
The key to getting chicks, the key to getting laid, the key to appearing successful, the key to being successful. It all begins with something that I had to learn myself. Love yourself. Love yourself first. I'm not talking about masturbation, you elementary morons out there.
Although talk radio as a medium isn't as big as it once was in the 80s and 90s, talk radio is still relevant today with social media like Twitter and podcasts, and explores the complexities of how media can create hostile environments, how the media creates people that are seduced or even addicted to a type of power, like an outspoken radio host, thus granting them power.
Inspired by my hit film The Doors, is a feverishly psychotic maze called Mr. Morrison's Wild Ride. It's an enhanced trip through depression, self-delusion, and crazed egomania. I wanted everyone to feel the fire that is Morrison. That's all right. You can get on, you little lizard king. At Oliver Stone Land, we question authority.
The only way out is death. The only way out is death. The only way out is death.
I'm not really dead. Morrison was the lifeblood of a generation that was sucked down the bathtub drain of the apathetic 70s and into the materialistic cesspool of the next decade. With the rise of gas.
Alas, we have Mojo Rising. The Doors in 1991 tells the story of legendary singer and poet Jim Morrison and his rise and fall with his band The Doors in the period the 1960s through the 70s. Our friend Val Kilmer stars as Morrison. And Meg Ryan, who plays Morrison's significant other, Pamela Corson. Prior to Stone's involvement with the film, The Doors was passed through many studios and directors such as Scorsese and De Palma and Friedkin. In 1985, producers even considered Oliver Stone to direct it, but Stone's agent never got back to the studio. And after a while with different studio changes, they reached out to Stone again, where he finally agreed to be attached to the film and talk with the band members. When this happened, Stone talked about ideas he had in some of the earlier drafts of the script. One scene in particular offended the band members and they didn't want Stone to direct. A year later, the studio wanted Stone back on the project to direct. Stone accepted once again, but after he finished working on Evita. However, Stone was spending years working on Evita, courting both Madonna and Meryl Streep to play the role. The film fell apart over salary negotiations. Therefore, Stone quickly jumped on The Doors in the meantime. Robbie Krieger, The Doors guitarist, didn't want The Doors biopic to come alive, but changed his mind when Stone was going to direct it. However, the keyboardist Ray Manzarek wanted to immortalize the band but didn't want Stone to be the one to direct the film. Manzarek wanted the most control over the film's vision and even wanted the film to be more so about the band members and not just about Morrison. When Stone was writing the script, he reached out to Morrison's parents and Pamela's family. The Morrisons were cool, and they only wanted to be depicted in flashback scenes and dream sequences. However, Pamela's family wanted Pamela to be depicted as an angel, and there were no suggestions that Pamela caused Morrison's death. The Corsons were also difficult because they didn't like Stone's script, and they would refuse Stone's use of Jim's poetry in the film since they owned the rights. This ultimately slowed production down. Before Stone was attached to the film, studios considered Johnny Depp, Tom Cruise, John Travolta to play Jim Morrison. Later on, Stone wanted Ian Astbury of The Cult to play Morrison, but he declined because of the way Morrison was portrayed in the film. So Stone decided Val Kilmer could play Morrison after seeing him in Willow.
You are great!
Kilmer tried to convince Stone that he'd make a good Jim Morrison by spending thousands of dollars out of pocket to make his own 8-minute audition video, where he sang and dressed like Morrison in several stages of his life. Kilmer learned 50 songs and 15 of them were performed in the film. He also spent hours with the Doors producer, Paul A. Rothchild, where they talked about stories, tragic moments, humorous moments, and how Jim interpreted his lyrics. Kilmer also wanted to meet the band members, but Manzarek refused to speak with him. Overall, things were looking pretty good for the film. The film had a huge budget of $32 million. It was filmed over 13 weeks, shot in LA, France, New York, and the Mojave Desert. In the concert scenes, Kilmer did his own singing and performing. However, his voice would begin to deteriorate after 2 or 3 takes. The end sequence took 5 days to shoot. Stone had 24 takes to pick from, but in the end, Kilmer was exhausted. But how can we forget Kilmer being Kilmer was linked to a memo that was sent out amongst the cast and crew, listing rules on how the actor was to be treated on the film. People were not allowed to approach him on set without a good reason, address him by his own name while he was in character, or stare at him on set. Stone saw this memo and contacted Kilmer's agent, and Kilmer claimed it was a huge misunderstanding and that the memo was only for his own people and not the film crew. When the film was released, it received backlash over historical inaccuracies. Some inaccuracies include Jim Morrison locking Pamela in the closet and setting it on fire wasn't true, or John Densmore was portrayed hating on Morrison because the singer's personal drug problem wasn't true. Densmore states in his biography that he never confronted Jim Morrison about his behavior. Another one was Andy Warhol being presented as a leering homosexual caricature. A lot of people had issues with these inaccuracies, including the people that sat down with Stone for hours discussing the Doors' specific history. The surviving Doors members were all, to one degree or another, unhappy with the final film, and were said to have heavily criticized Stone's portrayal of Morrison as an out-of-control sociopath. In a 1991 interview with Gary James, Mazier criticized Stone for exaggerating Morrison's alcohol consumption in the movie. Jim with a bottle all the time. It was ridiculous. It was not about Jim Morrison, it was about Jimbo Morrison and the drunk. God, where was the sensitive poet and the funny guy? The guy I knew was not on screen. In the afterword of his book, Riders of the Storm, Densmore said the movie is based on the myth of Jim Morrison and criticizes the film for portraying Morrison's ideas muddled through the haze of the drink. In a 1994 interview, Krieger said the film doesn't give the viewer any kind of understanding what Jim Morrison took. Krieger added that they left a lot of stuff out. Some of it was overblown, but a lot of stuff was very well done.
It's like Wall Street. It was that kind of reception where it just goes on. The Doors still plays today. But it was an homage to an era, an excess.
Does Ray Manzarek still hate it?
Oh, hate it.
Ray Manzarek was the keyboard player for the Doors.
You love the negative, but you know he was one of the negatives. But put it this way, I think Jim Morrison liked it.
Overall, the film was mixed with reviews. Everyone enjoyed Kilmer's performance, but didn't take to Stone's vision of the film and his statements about America during that time period.
Insane. Val Kilmer's wig goes up in flames. I'm serious. This is insane. And the Indians are drunk because they're drinking on the side. It got crazier and crazier and crazier. Chasing around, you know, one of them was looking for me with a tomahawk because he thought that I had been after his ugly squaw. But the point is that the Indians can be bad too, but they're also wonderful people. And there's something very pure still in their essence, you know, that may have been diluted by corruption in many cases, but it's still pure. So I respect the Aboriginal peoples of all races and places. And I hope all countries would stay a little bit in touch with their natures, because if they denature themselves completely, they'll be living in shopping malls with security guards.
1991, Stone released his most ambitious yet most controversial film, JFK. JFK is a film that discusses the events leading up to and then the aftermath of President John F. Kennedy's assassination, as well as discussing the well-known theory that it was a government cover-up. Stone received a copy of Jim Garrison's book On the Trail of the Assassins and quickly bought the film rights with his own money. He wanted to prevent studios from seeing it and developing it before he did. Stone quotes, "The Kennedy murder was one of the signal events of the post-war generation." Stone also got the rights to Jim Marr's book Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy. His main goal was to provide a rebuttal to the Warren Commission's report, which he believed was a great myth. And in order to fight the myth, you must create another counter-myth. In 1989, Stone got producer Terry Semel to fund JFK at Warner Bros. And got $20 million budget for the film. Even while they were shooting JFK, the film was receiving backlash on media outlets. The Chicago Tribune even called JFK an insult to the intelligence, and the Washington Post said, "On the set, Dallas in Wonderland," and blasted the film for absurdities and untruths. Stone responded to these articles by hiring a public relations firm that specializes in political issues. Anthony Lewis in the New York Times stated that the film tells us our government cannot be trusted to give an honest account of the presidential and assassination. Washington Post columnist George Will called Stone a man of technical skill, scant education, negatable conscience. When the film was released, it was polarized by critics and audience.
2 years later, Stone is still convinced he's right.
Governments lie. And everything we've learned since 1991 when the film came out has reinforced the notion that the governments have not been straight with us.
Do you see conspiracies in everything?
No, not in everything. We have conspiracies, but we also have actions that happen randomly, and accidents do happen.
Could it just be that we can't wrap our minds around the idea that the most powerful man in the world could be taken out by a nobody?
But I can wrap my mind around that. Like in a burst, again, of innocence, too. Like, Why doesn't anyone ever talk about it? I had believed that the man had been killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. Everyone did, except for those people who read anything. But, you know, we just went with it. I'd never thought about it. I met Garrison, and I fell into this idea like, let's go, let's do it. Let's bring out some of these things because you don't hear them. And I did it in a sort of innocence, I suppose. And it'd be very hard to go back there, knowing what I know. The attacks devastated me, hurt me. It was continual, and it was all major media establishment, always. People who attacked me didn't know me, whether it was Richard Nixon, George Bush, Henry Kissinger, Walter Cronkite, every newsman. Horrible things were written, and like I'd falsified it. We did fight back. Frank Mankiewicz, who'd worked with Robert Kennedy, worked with us with the PR. We fought back hard. We tried to answer articles. I chased the movie for 6 to 9 months. And I don't think I ever was the same. I don't think I would be ridiculed by the media and marginalized over the years, but I kept working. I had no choice. I believe in what I believe. I couldn't back down.
I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Sisco of the Chicago Tribune. And my bottom line on JFK is that it is full of questionable material, but also full of undeniably compelling entertainment. As director Oliver Stone sees it, the Kennedy assassination was a coup d'etat of mammoth proportion involving everyone from the CIA to LBJ to munition manufacturers to the media.
Debated and to come out and to talk with a great deal of exuberance and controversy about what's in it. I found this film exhilarating.
Me too.
And you know, I've read a lot of attacks on it. They've been attacking it now for months. One of the Newsweeklies said, well, he'll confuse people because he shows you scenes that aren't real and makes you think they are. And they cited as an example the scene where a cop takes a palm print on the rifle off of the hand of Oswald's corpse. Now, how many people in the theater are going to think that a real cop would pose for the motion picture cameras while he's falsifying evidence? I don't think so. I think intelligent moviegoers are capable of looking at this movie and knowing exactly what Stone did. He took real footage, he took fictional footage, and a lot of it is speculative. In other words, Garrison's imagining different ways the same things could have happened, and it's exhilarating for us to follow that thought process through to the end, even if at the end we still don't know who killed Kennedy.
In the 1990s, cases such as O.J. Simpson, the Mendes brothers, Tonya Harding, Rodney King, and Branch Davidson took place. This sparked interest in Stone. He believed that the media was very involved with the outcomes of the cases, and all around the media became an all-persuasive identity that marketed violence and suffering for the good of ratings. And voila, 1994's film Natural Born Killers was born. Based on the Tarantino script, it follows two victims, played by Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis, traumatized by their upbringing, become lovers and mass murderers, and their claim to fame as glorified celebrities by the media. However, the story was heavily changed by Stone and his team. Tarantino received story credit in the film, but ended up disowning it, but wishing Stone well.
Write True Romance. So I write True Romance, and then tried for a long time to get it going, couldn't get it going. Right. Then I wrote Natural Born Killers. Right. Tried for a long time to get that going, couldn't get it going. Wasn't working in the video store anymore. I had some weird little odd jobs keeping going.
When you say try to get it going, you'd mail it to studios?
No, I was actually trying to raise the money independently to shoot it and stuff. I didn't think anyone wanted to buy it, and nor did anyone want to buy it.
Natural Born Killers is most known for its psychedelic filming style, and out of all the other stylistic Oliver Stone films, this one takes the cake. It's iconic, even Gucci ripped it off for their perfume commercial. The final film contains about 3,000 cuts, when most films contain 600 or 700. Stone also incorporates visual elements of popular television, the film's visuals. Quote, "It had never quite been done before, a mixture of stocks and styles. I was influenced, I'd have to say, by MTV and some of the styles I saw in the early 80s and 90s on television. But no one had tried that style over the course of 900 minutes. Commercials were commonly on the air at the time of the film's release." Stone even got Trent Reznor of 9 Inch Nails to make the soundtrack for the film while Reznor was on tour.
Suggested to Oliver to try to turn the soundtrack into a collage of sound, kind of the way the movie used music, and make edits of things and have dialogue. And I instantly have nightmarish images of that Batman song that Prince did.
On top of producing a movie soundtrack and being named by Playgirl as one of 1994's sexiest rockers, Trent Reznor has managed to release a 9 Inch Nails album, The Downward Spiral, which surprised Trent and everyone by debuting at number 2 on the album chart.
So basically, Oliver Stone was making Fincher moves before Fincher made Seven.
I you know, I know you probably don't agree with me, but by the end of the movie, I think that love beats the demon. And I think that the reason Mickey and Mallory emerge as anti-heroes in a sense is because they love each other. I think it's a love story.
And so that's their saving grace at the end?
It's the only saving grace we got.
They love each other.
I can't say I condone their killing those people, but at least they changed. Which there are three.
And they loved each other, and that's the saving grace, that these two people who, this sort of 2 weeks of madness, they love each other, so that's the saving grace?
They love and they will not kill again.
But this is right after they killed.
I can't give away the ending. They kill for one reason only, because it's their only way to escape. Once they've escaped, they will not kill again.
How do we know that?
That's your call when you see the movie, but that's my feeling. And I think love will save the world, and I think love will save the 20th century.
These are interesting ideas. What baffles me in having seen the film and agreeing that it's controversial and it will polarize people is, in a sense, you come away from that saying that there is a redeeming value and these kids now love each other and therefore they're not going to kill again, and somehow there is redemption in that point for these people. All right, let's take another look.
After Natural Born Killers, Stone went on to do his next President series, Nixon, in 1995, a challenging film to write and direct, since Stone himself didn't like or agree with Nixon and had to find a way to make him sympathetic to the audience. In 1997, Stone also did U-Turn. In 1999, he made Any Given Sunday. You know, the football movie where Al Pacino's like the sergeant and the football players are like the soldiers.
The football film is exhausting. Should be exhausting. You should find it when you play a goddamn football game for 3 hours, you are exhausted.
In the 2000s, Stone began to slow down with his films. It was like right before his eyes, he was getting older. You know, making all these films when you're starting off young in the 80s, and then you just get project after project, and then suddenly you're 50 or 60 years old.
As I said, made these 9 movies in 8 years. It's nice to slow down a bit. I haven't been on a set since last August. We finished shooting. It's been a year of editing on this movie. So this is nice to not feel the compulsion to shoot, not to feel the compulsion to do anything, to not do, to release myself, relax myself from my own demons. That's not to say they're all going to go away.
He went on to do more films such as 2004's Alexander, World Trade Center in 2006 about 9/11, and then W in 2008. And then in 2015, Snowden came out, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Stone went on to write books and political documentaries. But besides his films, he's also known just to be a very outspoken political person in the media. Stone was going to direct a Weinstein Company documentary in which he left due to the allegations that were surfacing about Harvey Weinstein during the Me Too movement. He quotes, "I'm a believer that you wait until this thing goes to trial. I believe a man shouldn't be condemned by a vigilante system. It's not easy what he's going through either." But he eventually realized no one in his Hollywood circle wasn't exactly saying what he was saying and was supporting the victims. Stone later on went on Facebook and posted, "After looking at what has been reported to many publications over the last couple days, I'm appalled and commend the courage of the women who have stepped forward to report sexual abuse or rape." According to Vox, Oliver Stone was also accused of sexual misconduct with actresses Patricia Arquette and former Playboy model Carrie Stevens. These days, Oliver Stone's just chillin'. He doesn't like the new Hollywood after the entire Me-Too movement and all the obstacles you have to go through when making a big budget film.
As we were introducing you, you had a wry smile on your face. As we said, you've sort of fallen out of love with Hollywood, and at times you've described it as going crazy. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that's a bit sensational. You know, it's... I think what I'm saying is that Hollywood has changed. And, you know, when I did Platoon, when I did Salvador, I was blowing the explosives myself with the actors. I mean, we had no net. We were a low budget operation, you know, foreign country, and we had to get it done at a certain pace. So we were taking risks. But, you know, now it would be impossible. There's so many insurance clauses, so many advisors. They build the net so big that the safety factor becomes the major issue. Insurance becomes more important than substance.
Now, we've had unprecedented times recently, not just with the protests that we've seen over Black Lives Matter, also, of course, with the coronavirus pandemic, what that has meant for everybody, the restrictions. And I wondered what you thought about how President Trump has been handling the situation there, what you make of his leadership at the moment.
It seems like he's been very roundly criticized. The media has jumped on this, and they certainly have a point. I mean, Mr. Trump is a character beyond belief. You couldn't make a movie about him because he changes character all the time. He writes his own scenarios. He rewrites them when they don't please him. He doesn't have the same consistency of any of the presidents.
Overall, I really believe Oliver Stone's an important filmmaker and has made many of the best films that likely influenced my favorite filmmakers. I don't mind his outspoken nature because I believe he's an intelligent person. He's not just saying shit just to be controversial. He believes in what he decides to put out there, and he's got so many great ideas and critiques on American culture that I wish he would make more films. But, you know, he's kind of out of touch, and if he comments on today's generation, I don't know if it'll work out for him. I just know his films are like a time capsule of that time, and most of the stylistic choices we see in films today are thanks to people like Oliver Stone. I hope you all enjoyed the video and let me know what your favorite Oliver Stone movie is. If you're new to the channel, I like to talk about controversial filmmakers. If you have any requests, feel free to comment those down below, and thank you all for watching.